Hello, students. Today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about logos, and I might seem to go quite quickly through this video, but um, it's pretty lengthy and I'm trying to condense it. So if at any point you feel like I'm going too fast, just know that's the beauty of a video is that you can pause and go backwards or review any information that you want to. So logos is in an argument, it's the appeal to reason, and this is where we use evidence to argue. So, evidence can include case studies. If we're talking about something historical, that could be an example of if we're saying, maybe we should legalize marijuana recreationally in Florida, we might look at Colorado as a case study. Or if we're talking about euthanasia, we might look at Oregon as a case study, that kind of thing. Cause and effect can be a type of argument as well, or type of evidence where you're saying because this happened and this was the effect, this is likely to happen again, or this is unlikely to happen again, or just looking at a cause and effect pattern. Authority statements can be used as evidence. So if we're arguing something about global warming, we might look to or look for authorities who have examined weather patterns, who work for NASA. Those would all be credible authorities. If we want to know something about the economy, we might look for an economist, somebody who's well versed and maybe bipartisan would be best, who has, no bias toward either political party. Analogies are a form of evidence as well, and analogies are when you compare something to something else on a large scale. One of the most, I guess, common analogies that I can think of that's pretty recent is that there are many who, in the struggle for uh, gay marriage, who equated the civil rights of gay people to people of color in the 1960s and 1950s as they were trying to gain their own civil rights. So they compared those two groups, those two time periods, their fight for civil rights, and tried to draw parallels between them. Statistics are another form of evidence, and they are one that we often think of, right? Numbers can be very impressive to us. And as we're going through this, one of the things to think about, and your book does a good job of talking about this, is that numbers in and of themselves can be manipulated. So, really, for us to believe statistics, it's often the case that we need to trust the arguer, but also that the arguer gives us context for those numbers and what they mean. So I'm just going to make up some numbers here, but if somebody told me, you know, 2,500,000 people are affected by blisters or something like that, I'd be like, well, that sounds like a big number. 2,500,000 people. That must be a real problem. But then if you compare that to how many people there are in the world, that might be actually a very small number of people and go, wow, really a lot of people don't get blisters. That's not a lot of people if you think about things in the grand scheme of things. So when you're dealing with numbers, it's important to try to understand, what is the pool that they're drawing from. If they're giving you percentages, are these percentages really statistically significant? Um, you know, but numbers do help to give us a sense of an issue. So if they say something like, you know, 80% of college students graduate with immense student debt, well, we might go, oh, well, that seems inordinately large. It's not kind of unheard of for some students to graduate with some debt, but for that many, there must be an issue going on here. So, statistics in and of themselves can be very questionable, and it takes a good critical thinker to look at them and ask, are they logical? Are they reasonable? Is the person using them responsibly and in a way that makes sense? An anecdote can also be a part of evidence. And sometimes we think of anecdotes as being more emotional or appeals through pathos because anecdotes are often stories or personal stories. And so they often are very emotionally charged. If we think about the issues of illegal immigration that we've heard about a lot in the past few years, often, no matter what side of the story or what side of the argument you're on, they will pull forth a personal story, either of a person who came to this country illegally and is undocumented, but has made a life for themselves and is hardworking and a real asset to the United States. Or on the flip side, if you're, really fighting hard to um, clamp down on illegal immigration, you might tell a story of someone who came to this country illegally, was a gang member, terrorized people, raped people, was awful, um, and was hard to deport. So those personal stories are evidence, but we also want to couple them and say, is this personal story or this anecdote representative of this population by and large, or is just this a story to pull on our heartstrings and make us either angry or scared or hopeful or heartwarmed or whatever the case may be? So I had to include this because it's another ethos, pathos, logos summary, but you know, it's Star Wars related, so it's cool. Um, but it doesn't really tell you anything you don't know. Okay, so I know this is a very text heavy slide, and I apologize for that, but I'm trying to condense a lot of information here. So basically, this goes through what we just said, that logos is the use of facts, reasons, and logical evidence, and there's all kinds of things that constitute evidence to move your audience. So that's what you're looking for in the rhetorical analysis is how does your speech maker, writer, creator, arguer do this? You want to ask, are their reasons persuasive? Again, to you and to their imagined audience or their perceived audience. So, if I say to you, don't go outside, it's sunny outside, that's my reason. You might be like, that's not persuasive to me because I love the sun. But if you have, skin cancer and it's blazing hot, or if you are wearing wool all over your body and have nothing to change into, maybe then it would be persuasive. So you need to think about, are the reasons persuasive to that particular audience at that particular time? Are there reasons backed by enough evidence? And I'm saying your reasons here, but we're really looking at someone else's argument, so would be their reasons. And this really depends on the audience, right? Is how much evidence do you need? If you have a skeptical audience who is unlikely to accept your claim and your premise, then you probably need more evidence because you're going to have to really convince them of this. But if you're preaching to the choir, then you don't need a lot of evidence because they already agree with you, or they agree with you enough to listen to you at least. So if I say to you, you should not go outside because there is a tornado, and my reason is a tornado, do I need evidence? Probably not. Most of you would probably go, yeah, tornadoes are known to be destructive and take lives, so I'm gonna stay in, thanks. Yeah. You don't need me to explain to you what a tornado can do or to prove to you that tornadoes are really, in fact, very harmful. Um, maybe if you're one of those, what do they call them? Storm chasers, twister chasers? I don't know. If you're one of those people, maybe we do need to talk to you and give you some evidence. Uh, and this reminds me of, um, my husband and I have this argument. I keep bringing him into all my PowerPoints, poor guy. But he likes to wakeboard, and I'm a big scaredy cat. I'm terrified of alligators. And so I want to wakeboard, but I don't want to be in the water. And so sometimes we argue about alligators and the likelihood of an alligator coming to chomp on you while you're in the water. I'm sorry if you're scared of alligators and I'm like giving you some kind of trigger here, but this is, you know, if someone's talking to me and they're talking about how, the lakes are a little bit scary and they don't feel people should go in them, they don't need to supply a lot of evidence because I am with them. I agree the lakes are scary. But if you're talking to my husband, you probably need to because he grew up on lakes, he's never seen an alligator bite anybody, yada, yada, yada. I'm not going to summarize all his arguments because I don't believe him. Okay. So, is your evidence or is the arguer's evidence credible? Whom should you trust? And I don't know if I still. Oh, sorry. That wasn't what I wanted to connect to. So, is your evidence credible? Again, it depends. Where does your arguer get their evidence? Do they make it clear the traceability of it, where they're getting it from, or do you just trust them? You think they're a very smart person. I'm sure they got it somewhere reputable. Sometimes, again, when I'm listening to people on the radio, or that's where I get most of my news, or on the TV, and I think, are they getting this information from? Because I swear I've heard contradictory information in other places. So how is there so much contradictory information out there? Or contradictory evidence, things you would think would be facts. Again, global warming. You would think this is either like yes or no, right? Because it's science. But a lot of people argue about facts. And so then we go, who do we believe and why do we believe them? Because we trust them usually. Do your reasons clearly connect to your claims? So the claim might be don't go outside, you could be attacked by a polar bear. Well, in Florida, that doesn't connect, right? We go, no, there are no polar bears in Florida. Doesn't make sense. And then does the author avoid illogical thinking or fallacies? And that is a whole nother lecture reading. So we'll get into that later. But that's just basically where there are gaps in logic. So here's an example of one statement that is more logical and one that is more illogical. So if somebody was arguing this to me, this is how my rhetorical analysis would go. So someone tells me you should vote for John Smith for president because he has a lot of experience with foreign and domestic policy. Well, his claim is I should vote for John Smith. His support, his logos, is that this president has a lot of experience with foreign and domestic policy. And he could go on, he could give me evidence of that. But if I believe that, then I would say, yes, that is a reason that clearly is relevant to the claim. Because I believe that experience with foreign and domestic policy are important things, right? They are things that we should have in a president. So this last election we saw, we have a president now who does not come from a political sphere. He did not come in with experience with foreign and domestic policy, and some people were not bothered by that, or at least not tremendously bothered by that. And so maybe that reasoning is not that appealing to you. Illogical. You should vote for John Smith for president because he is very tall. So it's kind of one of those interesting trivia bits that at least in debates among presidential candidates, that the taller of the candidate is like 99% of the time perceived as winning the debate. And George W. Bush, who is a little bit on the shorter side, and he was debating John Kerry, who's very tall and skinny, that there was some controversy about giving him like a little platform to stand on behind his podium so that he would at least appear as tall as John Kerry. It's just very interesting how, our perception, does it matter whether our president is tall or not? Logically, it shouldn't, right? Unless the president keeps only very important documents on very tall, high shelves, and he's got to reach them. I don't know what bearing the height of a president would have on his ability to do the job. And yet, illogically, many of us perceive that if someone who is taller is more powerful, smarter, stronger, more successful. Identifying parts of logos. Okay, so different resources have different names for these kind of things, but they're all part of logos. And basically, there's the claim, the support, and the assumptions. Sometimes support is called, some people call it data, some people call it ground, some people call it backing. These are different rhetoric textbooks or handouts, or people might call it this. So if you hear a professor further on or someone on the news talking about that, they're all talking about kind of the same thing, and that's the support for an argument or a claim. The claim is the primary argument, so the overarching point that the arguer is making. And then at the bottom, you've got the assumptions, sometimes called warrants, and you'll hear that tossed around in arguments. It's the same thing, it's just different names. And these are the beliefs and values that are often unstated that an argument is grounded in. And they become very important when we're trying to analyze argument and when we're trying to make our own arguments. So the appeal to logos. So if your author or arguer has strong logos, they are very reasonable, then even if they are not persuasive to you or to their audience, maybe their audience doesn't like them, then they have a strong argument. Now, they might not be persuasive, and that's something else to comment on. Maybe, you know, I don't want to get too political, but I think sometimes people would look back at Hillary Clinton or someone like that and say, you know, she's making a good argument, very strong argument, reasonable, but I don't like her. I don't trust her, and so she's not going to be very persuasive. But she would still have a strong logical argument. The drawbacks of a strong appeal to logos is that sometimes it's difficult to cater your argument towards your specific audience that you want to move, to find reasons that are meaningful to them. For instance, if your audience is non-Christian, a secular audience, but you are arguing that marriage should be defined as one man and one woman, and one of the reasons you're arguing this is because of the Bible, that's a lot of your support is coming from the Bible. Well, is that reasoning going to be persuasive to that particular audience? I mean, the Bible is not strong evidence to them. It's not reasonable to them. So, no, it's not going to be. And then if you change your audience to be Christians, you would say, well, why are you bothering to argue to that audience? Because, again, preaching to the choir, they already agree with you. So, there's no sense. So, sometimes it's hard to think about your audience and think about what are they concerned about? What did they see as reasonable or relevant? So here's some examples of logos kind of in the real world. So on the Time magazine, just there's an emotional component here to the graphic image of a soldier, and it says one a day. Every day, one U.S. soldier commits suicide. Why the military can't defeat its most insidious enemy. So there you have a statistic. And then smoking kills, so why bother starting? So the argument there is, don't start smoking. And then they give you all these reasons. So major cause of stroke, very addictive, raises blood pressure, suppression of immune function, on and on. And these are all kind of scientific, health-related facts. But then you've also got this very emotional image combined with it of a gun and being loaded with cigarettes. So you've got logos and pathos at work at both of these. I think this is interesting. This is one of those things, I don't know, sometimes when I scroll through Facebook, I just get tired and I don't want to be on there anymore. But then sometimes I'm fascinated. I don't know if you do that. I feel like it's like a sociological experiment. And so someone I know posted this as a meme or GIF or whatever you want to call it. It says between 1945 and 1993, a total of 1,352 atomic bombs were exploded in nuclear tests, plus the two dropped on Japan. Okay, some facts, right? Those are facts. But the left wants you to believe that your light bulbs are what's causing the climate. I was confused when I first saw this. I was like, what? What are you talking about? Then I thought, oh, okay, so this is obviously someone who's conservative is saying that liberals talk about how you should switch to, different types of energy, like renewable energy, solar energy, or in your house, switch from, I forget what they're called, like regular light bulbs, from that to more energy conservative light bulbs, like fluorescent light bulbs, halogen light bulbs, LED bulbs, those kind of things. because that of the energy they use, which emits fossil fuels, which causes the atmosphere to thin, which causes climate change. Again, according to this person, this is according to liberals, but um, again, I would say this is according to scientists, not liberals, but I have a little bit of a bias, I'm sure. So, what you're looking at here is trying to deconstruct this argument. So I was trying to say, okay, so they're arguing that these nuclear tests, which are facts that these were dropped, that these atomic bombs and nuclear tests are what caused climate change, not light bulbs. And their argument is like, if something so catastrophic and big as this happened, how could light bulbs change the climate? But if you sit down and think about it, yes, even if atomic bombs and nuclear tests affected the atmosphere, which, is possible and probable. And when I think I did research this and I thought, yeah, it looks like it has affected. But light bulbs also have an energy use has affected the climate as well, has affected how much energy we use. And often when you think of how many light bulbs you have in a house and how many times you turn them on per day versus, even these large numbers of atomic bombs, you're still talking about a lot of energy. So when you break it down, this at first seemingly shocking argument, maybe it's not shocking to you, but I think it was meant to be, uh, where you're like, oh yeah, how could light bulbs do anything? No, man, atomic bombs? Totally, it's atomic bombs. It's not at all light bulbs. They're so little. How could they change the climate? So I think that's what we're meant to think. And when you're scrolling through Facebook, who really takes the time to, dissect all this information? But if you stop to do it, because we're bombarded with these things every day on social media and on the news and everywhere we go, if you stop to think about it, you will see, okay, that's not a logical argument. It's a little blurry, but I like this picture. It says, assumptions, never assume what you're trying to prove unless you're trying to prove you're a bonehead. Because assuming something is basically taking a belief and treating it like it's a fact. And assumptions and beliefs are not facts. They are opinions. You may believe them to be facts. That's part of a belief, right? Is that if you believe it, it is true for you. But if you can't see that a lot of your assumptions, a lot of your beliefs are just things that you, in your opinion, in your world, believe and that are not empirically true, then you're making some kind of error in judgment there. And so assumptions are often very difficult to identify, especially when they're unstated. Some arguments state them outright and some do not. But when they're unstated and when we agree with them, we are unlikely to see them or to think of them as beliefs. We're more likely to just think, oh, that's just the truth. That's just a fact. For example, Claremont's Club X is great because it plays techno music until 3 a.m. Well, if you're someone who enjoys techno music and you enjoy staying out late and dancing until 3 a.m., that might be a true statement for you. You might just be like, yeah, that's just the truth. It is great because of that. But that's a belief. That's an opinion for someone who enjoys those things. Um, Other examples of assumptions are some people believe, in our society that the wealthier people in our society should have a larger tax burden. They should pay more in taxes than the middle class or than lower classes. And not just even if we all paid 10%, by the very nature of the wealthier making more, they are going to pay more. But even more than that, many people believe that they should have a much larger percentage to pay of their income since they have so much. Um, Many people will quote, I think Spider-Man says it too, to those who have I'm gonna mangle this, aren't I? To those who much is given, much is required, or something, or you have a responsibility. So many people believe that, if you have the ability, you should help take care of our society. You should help take care of your community. Um, and you shouldn't be stingy with your money, that kind of thing. And then other people feel like, well, you know, why do I have to pay for other people, especially other people who might be just um, unwilling to work, so they might be on unemployment or what they would call entitlement programs, but what other people might call government assistance, depending on your assumption and how you see those programs. But those people who are wealthy and don't want to pay more in taxes might say, well, I worked very hard for this and I want to leave this money to my kids, or I want to, maybe I do want to buy another boat with it. Sometimes there's class warfare where, people will kind of attack the rich and say, oh, you're being greedy. You just want to buy a yacht and have a third home and, do all these things. You don't want to help others and you're stingy with your money. And then the other side says, no, I've worked hard for my money and I don't want to give it to people who are unwilling to work or just want to feed off the system. And so you see those kind of assumptions at work. So here are a couple more examples. Obama should not be reelected because he is a socialist. So if we try to break this down, we can see the claim is the argument. So just the argument itself, what they want you to believe or do. Obama should not be reelected. Why? What's the support, the grounds, the data, the backing? He is a socialist. What's the assumption here? Well, there are usually more than one, so there are a couple at work here. You could say they're assuming he's a socialist, which again he's denied, and many people have argued about whether or not he is a socialist. But you could also say, if you want to say, okay, he is a socialist, this statement implies that being a socialist is bad, or that socialists would not make good presidents. This is a few elections back, but Mitt Romney would not make a good president because he crated his dog Seamus on the roof of his car on a 12-hour ride from Boston to Canada. So I don't know if you remember that whole controversy, but that was going on forever, and he was on 60 Minutes kind of defending crating his dog on top of the roof of the car, and the animal lovers were up in arms about it, saying that basically, a person who has this kind of character, who cares so little for his own dog and is willing in these cold temperatures to, for such a long ride to put his dog on the roof of his car, would not make a good president because that's just an uncaring thing to do. So that's their assumption here, is that, someone who acts this way would not make a good president. Um, Going on. So again, never assume the obvious is true, right? Is that question your assumptions, question your beliefs, question your arguer, and what are they not stating in their argument? So, what do they believe to be true for their argument to be true that might be unstated? And I'm going to go through just a couple more examples here that I think are kind of illustrative before I leave you. I like that quote by Adrian Rich. Until we can understand the assumptions in which we are drenched, we cannot know ourselves. So let's take this very simple statement here. You should not date him because he is ugly. So if somebody said this to you, what are they claiming? You should not date him. What is their support? Because he is ugly. What are they assuming? Ugly people should not be dated, right? Or ugly people are not dateable. They are also assuming he's ugly. You could say that, but I often want you to kind of take what is said and try to generalize it. What do they see to be true as a general premise or a generalization for their argument to be true? So, The Fast and the Furious is an awesome movie because it has a lot of car chase scenes. So, I disagree with this statement. I'm sorry if you're a Fast and Furious fan. I'm just not a big car chase action. I like action movies. I just don't like car chases. They bore me. Okay, so the claim is The Fast and Furious is an awesome movie. Support or grounds, it has a lot of car chase scenes. Assumption, movies that have a lot of car chase scenes are awesome, right? Or are entertaining or are good. She is not a good teacher because she gives a lot of homework. I like this one too. So the claim is she is not a good teacher. The grounds, why? Because she gives a lot of homework. The assumption, homework is bad. Teachers who give homework are bad. You can't learn a lot from homework. Good teachers don't give a lot of homework. There are a few ways you can state it. I'm going to jump to a couple more here. This is something, I'm glad we don't hear this as much anymore as we used to. Of course she wanted to have sex. Didn't you see the way she was dressed? So you see here I've broken out of the claim because support structure of the argument. This is much more how people talk. And so here we're trying to say, what is the claim? So the claim is she wanted to have sex. What's the support? The way she was dressed. So what is this person assuming that is unstated? That the way a woman is dressed indicates something about her level of sexual readiness, right? So some students will tell me, oh, that she was dressed provocatively. But we don't know that. We don't know. She could have been wearing a turtleneck and wool pants. And maybe to this person that indicates that, somebody really wants it. I don't know. But there's nothing in the statement to go there. So, we don't want to read into things that aren't there. We just want to say what is implied by this statement. Let's see. I like this. I feel bad. This is my mom. She makes it into a lot of these little snippets here. Why would you vote for Hillary Clinton? She's so unfeminine. So what's the claim there? I mean, you could say the claim is that she's so unfeminine, but I think the real claim is that you shouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton, and that's implied, right? A lot of people ask us questions, but there's an implied argument in their question. And then the support that they give us is she's so unfeminine. And kind of like John Smith being so tall, I don't see what someone being feminine or unfeminine has to do with their ability to hold public office. But apparently this was a big thing for people, right? They made a lot of fun of her pantsuits. And, again, maybe that was just that they didn't like her. But it seemed to have a lot of bearing on their evaluation of her as a potential president when the debates came up. Okay, last one. Illegal immigrants are overwhelming America. I can't even find someone who speaks English to help me when I go to Home Depot. So this is out of the mouths of Claremontians. I hate to tell you guys that. If you're in Leesburg, I guess maybe you can hear it up there too. And I haven't heard this. I heard this a long, long time ago. But what is the claim here? Illegal immigrants are overwhelming America. Support? I can't even find someone who speaks English to help me when I go to Home Depot. What are some assumptions this speaker is making? I think there are multiple ones here, right? One of them is that someone who doesn't speak English is an illegal immigrant. That's an assumption. That's not a fact. That Home Depot hires illegal immigrants? Maybe true. I don't know. I don't think it is, but they're assuming it is. I don't think they've checked with Home Depot. That what's true of Home Depot is representative of America. And I think this is one of the biggest generalizations that I hear from people is that they think that their 1, 2, maybe 3 experiences in life are representative of America. And I feel like you need a much more statistically significant group or a study to support the idea that something is happening across America or that something is overwhelming America for that to be true. Now, that may be true in your experience overwhelmingly, but you are one person. How many experiences are we really talking about? So thinking about that as evidence and data. So hopefully this gives you a little bit more information about logos and how to evaluate it. Please reach out if you have any questions and let me know if I can help with anything.